Voices in the Park is a very well-written picture book for both children and young adults. Anthony Brown's book was published in 1999 and has been a top seller since. The book allows us to see life through each of the characters in the story. This book belongs to the contemporary realistic fiction genre. This genre is defined by a vivid realistic setting, multi-dimensional, credible characters, and believable problems that are understood by the intended age group. Voices in the Park satisfies these criteria. This is a plausible story that could happen in today's world. An upper-class mother and son could walk their dog to the park and meet other people who may not be of the same socioeconomic status as they are. There are other parts of the story that fit into this mold. This is a realistic occurrence that can happen daily, with easily understood problems for the reader. The characters in the story make it easy for children to relate to through use of language and how they interact with each other. Brown attempts to further the reader's ability to relate to the characters by portraying them as gorillas. How?
If the characters had been depicted as human, readers might refuse to relate to the characters due to preconceived bias about race, socioeconomic class, and/or the gender of the characters.
Reading with such prejudice could certainly limit the reader's ability and/or willingness to make personal connections to the experiences of characters.
When a reader is able to visualize the characters as animals, which lack certain human elements of socioeconomic status and gender roles, they will more likely relate to them. The animal depictions also force readers to focus on other artistic elements that imply socioeconomic status and gender roles.
The depiction of the mother implies wealth and stereotypical attitudes of wealthy women.
The depiction of the father implies poverty and attitudes of poor men.
The children seem to transcend gender stereotypes, as the boy takes on more of a female gender role. He is reluctant to play with the girl, and less outgoing.
The girl wants to play with the boy and is much more outgoing. She seems to convince the boy to play, which is not very characteristic of girls in most stories.
Textual elements. The text itself reads as 4 separate stories, each with its own voice. At the end, Anthony Brown blends the voices to create one semi-ambiguous ending, letting the reader fill in the holes. The pictures do the same thing, relying on the reader to come up with the actual relevance. Text and font choices play a crucial role in Voices in the Park by Anthony Brown. Each font style is carefully selected to reflect the distinct voices of the characters. For Charles's mother, a font like Times New Roman is used. Its tall letters with elegant tails at the top and bottom convey a sense of formality and cultural refinement. Smudge's father, on the other hand, is represented through a less formal, bolded font with rounded letters, suggesting his working-class background and deep, rough voice. Charles's font is thin and barely visible, symbolizing his weak and fearful demeanor, especially in comparison to his mother's authoritative tone. Smudge's font is playful and bold, mirroring her energetic and hearty personality. Each choice of font by Brown is a deliberate attempt to give readers a glimpse into the characters' attitudes and voices. In Voices in the Park, each character's perspective is isolated, allowing readers to understand how they perceive each other and the events unfolding around them.
Upon seeing Smudge's father, I found him quite frightful. His dog, Albert, a mere mongrel, and Smudge, a very rough-looking child. They certainly seemed beneath us, possibly due to their less refined appearance.
My daughter Smudge always cheers me up, and I just wish I had as much energy as that dog, Albert. Right now, I'm just focused on finding a job.
Albert seemed like a friendly dog to me. I didn't really notice Smudge's father, but Smudge was amazing at the playground. She was funny and great at the slide and monkey bars. I hope she's there next time I go to the park.
Dad seemed really fed up today, so I suggested we go to the park. Charles's dog, Victoria, was nice, and his mum, well, she was a silly twit. Charlie was a bit wimpy at first, but turned out to be quite friendly. We had a good time, though I noticed he was sad when his mum found him.
Through these varied viewpoints, Brown explores the characters' inner worlds and their interactions. Charles begins sad and transforms into a happier state, only to become sad again under his mother's influence. Smudge's father remains preoccupied with his job search, while Charles's mother is more concerned with appearances than her son's happiness. Smudge, observant and empathetic, notices the emotional undercurrents affecting everyone. Voices in the Park employs various artistic styles to enhance the storytelling. Impressionistic art is notably used to depict the passage of time and the changing seasons that align with each character's narrative. In Charles's mother's segments, the impressionistic technique captures the essence of fall with dabs of brown, yellow, orange and red, representing the changing colours of the leaves. This mimics how our eyes perceive and merge colours. On page 18, the playful scene of the dogs, Victoria and Albert, is set against a backdrop of spring with vibrant pinks, reds, greens, whites and blues, symbolising the blooming flowers. Just 2 pages later, the same spring colours frame Smudge and Charles climbing a tree. However, as Charles is led away from Smudge, the scenery shifts dramatically to a pre-winter atmosphere, with sagging branches and dark muted colours of green, black and brown, reflecting the shift in Charles's emotional state from joy back to sadness. Illustration placement on the page. For the mother, the illustrations are surrounded by clear, straight edges and corners for the border. In Smudge's father illustrations, it starts out with him sitting on the couch, showing three-dimensionality when including the shadow behind him. The next page is a full bleed illustration that has no borders, only for the end of the page, catching your attention and adding visual information to the text. The third page into his voice, it shows him taking the leash off an excited Albert. In this illustration, the head of the dog is outside of the border of that page. This could mean that the dog is not held to the distinct boundaries there are in society. Throughout his voice, there are no distinctly drawn borders. Charles's illustrations vary from being bordered, then progressing to freestyle dimensionality, and then into full-page bleeds. The lined borders are placed around the scenes where he is either in close proximity or restricted by his mother's ideals. His perception of the world is bound to how and what his mother teaches him to see. When he meets Smudge, his placement of the illustration changes. He is shown in a freestanding picture of him and her playing together on the monkey bars. Then the picture changes to a wavy border without lines restricting him. It then evolves into a full-page bleed as he is headed back home with his mother and Victoria. In Smudge's illustrations, the pictures are either placed in the middle of the page without borders or are of a full-page bleed. Line, shape, texture, colour and design. Throughout the illustrations in this book, the illustrator used lines in ways to represent action and emotion, such as the case of Smudge's perception of Charles's mother. However, another way Brown used the concept of the line was to explain divisions in relationships and class distinctions. The first picture in Charles's voice shows the dog and him are separated by the division of the rooms. By showing the dog, most commonly believed to be man's best friend, off in another room, distant to the boy, shows a division in their relationship. There is also a picture of Charles and his mother sitting on a park bench within the first voice's illustrations. Both of them are separated by an invisible line that is drawn between them and are facing opposite directions. This resembles the division in their relationship also. What are more interesting to note is the implications of the division of class in these illustrations. In the illustrations for the first voice, there is one frame where it shows Smudge's father in worn clothes, reading a newspaper while sitting on a park bench. Behind him is a dog waste disposal and garbage littered on the ground. Then there is a lamppost that divides the frame between him and Charles's mother. She is standing there, dressed in more expensive and fancier clothes with all of her jewellery on. Notice behind her there is no garbage at all. The grass all around her is nice and clean. This illustration shows the social class divide, comparing the surroundings of someone that is of lower class and upper class drawn together in a public park. That lamppost serves as a device to show a comparison between the two next to each other. The line of the lamppost works again in showing the divide between the perceptions of the world from the point of view of Charles and Smudge, in an illustration placed in the third voice. By placing the line between characters resembles some type of separations in this book, whether it is in relation to relationships or social class status. Postmodern picture books are often non-linear, with a number of apparently unconnected plots. For example, in Voices in the Park, there are 4 distinct voices, each describing their own version of the same walk in the park, and the whole story does not come together until the reader has read all 4 voices. The notion of intertextuality refers to all kinds of links between 2 or more texts. Irony, parody, literacy, and extra-literary allusions, direct quotations or indirect references to previous texts, fracturing of well-known patterns, and so on. Intertextuality is prevalent in Voices in the Park. There are a number of art references in Voices in the Park. These references include the Mona Lisa, Halsey's Laughing Cavalier, Munch's Scream, and perhaps the most obvious, Brown's repeated references to Magritte with his hat motif. Other intertextual references include the appearance of Mary Poppins and King Kong. Whilst readers, adult or child, would not necessarily understand or even notice all such references in a picture book, they would be likely to notice some. As Beckett points out, readers who are unable to decode the parody at more sophisticated levels or to identify the target painting or sculpture will at least recognise the intent to parody and can still appreciate the humorous and playful treatment of pre-existing artworks. Beckett goes on to explore the reasons for these parodies, saying, "Whatever their reasons for parodying artworks, illustrators offer enlightened adult mediators a wonderful opportunity to introduce children to the original works to which they refer." I agree with Beckett on this matter, and believe that is one of the fundamental reasons why the postmodern picture book is able to capture both the adult and the child reader's interest. Visual intertextual references appear throughout the 4 chapters and suggest upcoming events in the story. The first of these references occurs on the second page of the first voice. The mouth of the scruffy mongrel on the right-hand side of the illustration, and the tips of Charles's shoes on the left. Later in the same chapter, the edge of smudge can be seen in the illustration of Charles and his mother sitting on the bench, and on the following page we see a man in old clothing sitting on the bench reading his newspaper. These references all allude to the stories of other characters whom the reader has not yet met. However, it is not until a reader has read all 4 chapters that they would realise the significance of these allusions. Postmodern picture books have had, and continue to have, a significant impact on the process of reading. Children are encouraged to reflect on what they are reading, how the text and images interact with each other. They are given opportunities to notice intertextual references and inspired to involve themselves in the stories they are reading. Postmodern picture books appeal to the current generation of cyberkids because readers are encouraged to interact with the story in a similar way to computer gaming, while the opportunities for intertextuality and parody in postmodern picture books provide another level for adults to enjoy. In the words of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, good children's literature appeals not only to the child in the adult, but to the adult in the child. The characteristics of postmodern books are many and typically diverse. Postmodern picture books offer more than a reading experience. They add an experience in narrative construction. Children can create many, sometimes nuanced, meanings from the interplay of words, images, sidebars, balloons and the like, much like the hypertext on a computer or television channel surfing. The consequential narratives may be infinitely constructed and indeed different each time the book is read. Postmodern picture books, as noted, are busy. Children must actively engage in them on several levels. Postmodern picture books often contain a socio-cultural or political concern. The postmodern agendas of the other, the feminist, or the multicultural are common themes. Postmodern picture books have distinct features. The story is often non-linear. The books may contain irony or ambiguity, or are sarcastic and cynical. They play with traditional formats. Surrealistic images or completely unrelated images are used. The format of the book itself may be expanded in size, shape, construction, and the books may be read backwards, upside down, or even back and forth, offering a hypertext experience to the reading. Finally, they promote and indulge the reader as the privileged creator of the narrative. Postmodern picture books have a special place in our worlds, equally as children, as adolescents, and as adults. They shift the ground upon which we walk, requiring us to re-evaluate truth and reality as offered in something as basic as a children's storybook. Rather than providing order, these books show the quixotic nature of the world. Then they reassure the reader that this uncertainty can be overcome and that the world is a wondrous and surprising place. This is a well-written book because it depicts economic status and race in a way in which it can be discussed by anyone. The story starts out with the mother's point of view and ends with the little girl's. I believe that the author began with the mother because in society the rich is first and the poor is last. This would be a good representation of classification and how money can determine your order in life. When the father starts to talk as he walks through the park, there are signs of gloom and unhappiness. The Mona Lisa portrait is crying, showing the sorrow of the family. There is trash everywhere to illustrate how no one cares. And there is also a man begging for spare change, which is something most seen in areas of lower economic stature. However, when he is walking home from the park, the homeless man is up dancing, and the pictures come to life, illustrating the happiness that his daughter had brought him. I believe that Brown is trying to send the message that money does not bring happiness. Though the father and daughter were not as well off as the mother and son, they still were able to be joyful. I appreciate the fact that Brown used gorillas in the story so that race would not be obvious. However, the gorillas' shade of colour is different. The older gorillas are darker than the younger ones, and even though the lower-class father face is dark like the upper-class mother, his hands and arms appear to be that of a Caucasian man. This is a great story because it is one that can be used in not just an English class, but in all subjects of learning. I like the fact that Brown is not sending just one certain message to young readers, but everyone can relate to this book in some form, because with each voice in the book comes a different personality. This is truly a remarkable book for its many elements of literature.